folks, and welcome to this week's show. Today, as you can guess by the background, Jeremy and I, back by popular demand there, Jeremy, we've got Bob Marley and the Wailers, the fantastic Bob Marley and the Wailers. It's an odd one today. Before we start, I just want to say there are very few artists who define a genre. And Bob Marley clearly does, you know, alongside the Wailers. I can't think of anybody else. You could argue for Miles Davis to a certain point, but not as dominant as Bob Marley, dominates the idea of reggae and the whole sort of process behind it. Before we do sort of any start, we're going to go through all the albums. I'm going to rank them all, and we'll do the rankings in a second there. Just from my perspective, because this is from a sort of European perspective, if you like. I was wondering, how as an American did you get into reggae and sort of into Bob Marley and the Wailers? How did that happen?
Well, thanks for asking, and thanks for asking me to be here. This is so much fun.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You know, I've been thinking about this for the last few weeks as I've been listening to everything and making my notes and making my rankings. I also think I heard My Boy Lollipop at some point along the way. And just maybe these things were played sometimes as novelty songs. And even hearing I Shot the Sheriff by Eric Clapton, there was something about the rhythm that just attracted me. And I remember buying my brother a copy of Burnin for Christmas, Hanukkah, and we put it on and we were just astonished. It sounded so weird. It took a minute for my ears to adjust. The falsetto of Bunny Wailer and just the rhythms were so much sharper than anything Eric Clapton was doing, you know, down at Criteria Studios in Miami. But that was the thing that led me on the path. And then I also had a teacher, a science teacher who was from Jamaica. And she was really, really wonderful. When she got wind that I liked reggae, she started feeding me stuff. She even gave me 45s and talked about the relationship of Bob Marley in Jamaica. And then later on in high school, I actually worked at a Caribbean library on the Upper East Side here in Manhattan and learned how to do research and wrote a whole paper about reggae and Rastafarianism. I just got very, very deeply into it. In fact, I was lucky enough to see Bob Marley.
You really? Wow.
Yeah. About 2 days before the concert represented on my shirt.
Yeah.
His second to last concert in New York, his third to last concert ever. He played at Madison Square Garden with the Commodores and Curtis Blow.
Yeah.
This was a famous concert where he was trying to reach out to an American Black audience. So he combined himself with these other artists. And it was an absolutely incredible experience. I feel like I just kind of existed in every note that he played, every sound that came from that stage. Absolutely extraordinary. One of the greatest concerts I've ever seen, if not the greatest. He only played for about an hour because it was this whole 3-band lineup.
Yeah.
He was in the middle, but he ran through a lot of songs, which we'll talk about later. And I think that I obviously expanded my reggae love to many other artists: Burning Spear, Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs, Lee Scratch Perry, of course, is the avatar of production, but King Tubby, and just listened to a ton of reggae.
I was listening to King Tubby this morning, funnily enough, but there you have it, you know.
There's something about Bob Marley. I just ended up getting all the albums and really going deep. Just absolutely fantastic stuff. Now, I imagine there's a huge reggae. Reggae's much more popular in England.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because it was huge in the 70s in particular, you know, and then in the 80s, obviously, you had the more commercial aspect of reggae. I mean, for me as a kid, I mean, Exodus is the album that sort of rang out. You'd hear that a lot in 77. It was one of those albums that was just sort of, you could hear it virtually everywhere you went. It was that. You had ABBA and you had Queen. And it wasn't the Sex Pistols as everyone thought it was at the time in 77. It was those three artists, really, were the artists that you tend to hear more. And yeah, so it's always in your conscience. You heard certain things, you heard Marley. And for me, it was slightly later I got into them because I started liking certain reggae artists. I liked Steel Pulse, for example.
Fantastic.
you know, really, really like actually Burnin Spear, as you say. And then obviously you had stuff like Marcus Garvey and all that sort of thing, you know, it's brilliant. But Bob Marley was the one who dominated everything. And for me, when I was a little kid in the very early 80s, I had the Uprising cassette. And I used to play various cassettes to go to sleep. And Uprising was probably the one I played the most. It was the album I played the most to go to sleep to. And that's why it's maybe so special to me as an album. But actually, I think it's brilliant anyway. I don't want to give too many spoilers away yet.
I'll give it away.
But it's just one of those albums. I played it to death for years. I mean, I'm talking 4, 5 years. It was played for a long time as one of these things. You put a cassette on, it would flip over, and you'd hear the other side. Sometimes you wouldn't make it because you were asleep, but it was just one of those tapes. I just played it to death. And then obviously I got into all the other albums as well. You go back and you listen to various things. You go, oh, this is brilliant, you know. But the reggae scene's massive. Obviously, it was in Newcastle, not a massive deal, I'll be honest. But in London, of course, and in the Midlands, it's absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. Newcastle's a totally different enclave, and it's a very different sort of very different market. Although bizarrely in Newcastle, the big thing that Newcastle in the late 70s was ska. So you had the whole two-tone movement.
Yes.
Like Madness, the Specials, Selector, all those great bands, The Beat. And it's massive in Newcastle. I remember Madness, they always say this. I mentioned it recently when I went to see them, that Newcastle had their biggest fan club membership. So there was that huge movement because ska was a mix at the time between punk and reggae, and just worked great.
That fed into my love of reggae as well, because it was kind of all happening at the same time, the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
I went as the two-tone man for Halloween one year.
Right. Is that right?
Got to see the Specials and Madness, different concerts.
Who was based on Peter Tosh, of course, as well. Yeah.
And then that led me back to getting a Scatolites record, a Don Drummond record. I was really going deep. So
yeah, because obviously over here you had like Toots and the Maytals were massive as well.
Toots, fantastic.
And of course, popularized also by bands like The Clash, who would do like Pressure Drop and do great versions of it, actually, you know. So yeah, right. Let's dive in then. Before we do this, and the rankings, folks, as you can see on the screen, we've got 5 stars down to 0.5, covering 13 studio albums, arguably 12, but we'll go 13. And Masterpiece for 5 stars, 4.5 for essential, 4 for excellent, 3.5 very good, 3 good, 2.5 fair, 2 weak, 1.5 very poor, 1 awful, 0.5 don't bother. So this is going to be interesting. I'm actually looking forward to seeing where our rankings converge and where they diverge. This will be interesting. So Jeremy, what have you got in at number 13 then?
At number 13, I was somewhat disappointed to find it there, but the Wailing Wailers, the debut album,
right,
1965. I gave it 2.5 stars. It feels very vague. The production is not sharp. The songs are not all great. There's obviously some really good ones like Simmer Down, One Love, but I feel like I heard better versions of them in other places. And Marley also seems to be experimenting with his voice a bit. Like he's not quite on the line. Now, one thing that's really odd, and I think it's a little bit like David Bowie, because when Bowie put out his first album, you thought, what are these songs? He has so many better songs that were singles or not released. And it's kind of the same with Bob Marley, because this was a different compilation. This was a compilation. So this is all singles.
Yes.
And it's a much better album. But for whatever reason, I guess they really were more of a singles band, and they kind of tanked it on that debut album. So,
and they were a ska band, of course. But there was I don't know when the phrase reggae came into being, actually.
A little bit later, maybe 68, 69.
Yeah, in the UK, of course, you had like stuff like Skinhead, Moonstomp, and all that sort of stuff coming in, and then you just started Dennis Brown and all that as well. It's just sort of coming in at that point. Yeah, it's interesting. Right. Well, my number 13. Oh, sorry, how many stars did you say? 2.5 there, was it?
2.5, yes.
Right. Okay, interesting. Mine, and I'm going to be dead straight here, was my number 13 is Confrontation. And I think it's terrible. I think it's absolutely terrible. I've given it 1 star. I think the production is so bad on it. I think Buffalo Soldier is brilliant. It's absolutely outstanding. Uh, there's nobody can get away from it. It's great, and there are a couple of other good songs on it. I quite like Black Man Redemption and Chant Down Babylon. Pretty decent, but there's nothing there that I think, oh, this is great. I mean, I know I've written here just awful keys. It sounds like a supermarket song. I've got I've got, was it Stiff-Necked Fools, poor song. And there's lots of poor songs on the album and nothing that jumps out at me. I think it's the production. There's no way in the world I would have saw Marley picking any of these songs to be on his next album apart from Buffalo Soldiers. It just doesn't for me, doesn't do it for me. And there are other songs when you listen to stuff that was released subsequently. I mean, Ion Lion Zion is an absolute classic song. And that could have been on this compilation, really, if they'd actually dug a little deeper. Updraw song. But no, that's my number 30. I think it's absolutely terrible. It really is. And I'll give it 1 star. It's awful. So there we have it. That's my low. That's as low as I go, by the way, folks. There's a considerable jump after this. So what have you got at number 12?
All right. Well, that was a bit of a surprise to me, but this may be a bit of a surprise to you, which number 12, I had Kaya. I gave it 3 stars. It is an immaculately produced album. It's very, very smooth and clean, but it feels a bit supercilious. It feels a bit, and also kind of knowing that it was leftovers from the Exodus sessions in a way, and that he was kind of, people thought he was too serious, so let me go this way. It feels compromised. Obviously, there's some great songs on it, but Kaya and The Sun is Shining were both better in earlier recordings. Is It Love? Is This Love? Is a great song, but it sounded better live on the Babylon by Bus album. I just find the whole thing.
That is a great version, actually, to be fair.
Yeah, and I just find it it's too smooth, it's too self-satisfied. He's like justifying his wandering away from his family. It just rubs me the wrong way. It's not an unpleasant listen, but if you listen too hard, it just falls apart.
Okay, I'm taken aback. You can see where I'm going. There's quite a contrast here. My number 12 is Soul Rebels, which is the Wailers' second album. It came out in 1970. Controversial sleeve. I mean, the band, I know, were deeply unhappy with it. It's like a sort of soft porn cover, is the only way to describe it.
Goes with the territory, I think.
Yeah. A different lineup as well. According to the details, the information that I got, you got Mike Francis on drums and Jeff Pilkington on bass. Just quite a different band. There are some great songs on this album, and I've given it 2 stars. I mean, Soul Rebel is a great song. I've got written down 400 Years, obviously, is a fantastic song. It's a faster version, but it's such a great song. It really stands.
Yeah.
Reaction, of course, as well, is a great song. Which again, Peter Tosh. My problem is there's a lot of the album is almost like an album mix between like reggae and James Brown, like soul. Earlier James Brown, you got the Try Me song, and then of course James Brown famously had a song called Try Me. And there is actually a James Brown song on the album, My Cup, and it doesn't really fit. That's why I've given it 2 stars, just because it's not coherent as an album. It's neither this and it's neither that either. It's not a ska album. It's not a reggae album as the others are. It's a bit of a mishmash album. Some absolutely stone cold killers on it, but some songs that don't really fit. I think, well, it's not a really great mix. So that's my number 12. What have you got at number 11 then?
And number 11, I'm in the same zone, but not quite there. I went with Soul Revolution Part 2, the unusually named Soul Revolution Part 2.
Yep.
There was no Part 1. Sometimes it's called Part 1. This is another one they did with Lee Perry. And it does have many extraordinary songs. The original version of Keep On Moving, much better than the one on Kaya. Don't Rock My Boat, same thing. Put It On, excellent version. Duppy Conqueror, the Kaya original, and Sun Is Shining. It just comes down on you in a way that the Kaya version does not.
I think that's the version that they used for the dance version as well in terms of the vocals.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what's interesting with Kaya, and we'll come to it more when I talk about my when it comes to my choice for that, is the Stephen Marley mix. I don't know if you've heard it.
Mm-mm.
And I absolutely, well, I'm not going into it too much. We'll come to it when it comes to it, but it's very different. It's very different. I'm going to say it. Sorry, go on. You carry on.
Yes, but even with all those great songs, there's a lot of filler on it. Songs that just don't, you hear them, and then you don't remember them. Fussing and Fighting, Memphis, Riding High, Brainwashing is okay, but it kind of dwindles out. So I just feel like it's almost half an album. The thing that's odd about these Lee Perry albums, if you take a Lee Perry, Bob Marley singles compilation, it will blow your mind, and it'll have some of these songs on it.
Yeah.
But when they put them on the albums, I think they were kind of reaching, kind of grasping for things to fill the album out with. So even so, I gave it 3.5 stars. It has too many good songs on it to deny, but it is my number 11. Yeah,
I totally agree with you on that front with regards to the Lee Perry stuff. So you'll see it soon. My number 11 is the Wailers Wailing. It's basically a ska album, which I've already said. I've given it 2.5 stars. Now, there are a number of songs on this album that could have easily been on the Specials' first album. When you hear this sort of rhythm, you could imagine them redoing it, like Rude Boy, for example. What else have I got written down here? Lonesome Feeling. I could clearly hear it on the first Specials album. There are some unusual tracks. What's New Pussycat?
Yeah, that I can't.
Wow.
I can't.
One Love, of course, which would feature later on Exodus. I've got you. I Need You as a Smokey Robinson type track. So there is a little bit, and what I want to comment very briefly for a second is how much the Wailers were, as well as being a reggae band, but a very, very soul-influenced band. And you can hear their influences by bands like The Impressions, for example, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson, and Miracles. You can hear all of that harmony within them. It went when Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer left. A big section of that left for me.
Yeah.
Yes, the Three Eyes came in and did a magnificent job, but a big chunk of that beautiful harmony left, and they were never quite the same again after that.
Yeah.
Better in some cases, worse in others. So you get your old classic swings and roundabouts. So as a debut album, I think it's interesting. It's not an album you're going to whip out and put on lots, but it's a fascinating insight in terms of where the band were as young kids. So yeah, that was my choice. What have you got in at number 10 then?
Number 10, I have Confrontation. It is a mishmash. Buffalo Soldiers, obviously incredible. Black Man Redemption is very good, but I have the original singles, much better. I actually like I Know. It's sort of sneaky, and I found it unexpected. Like this time listening, I hadn't listened in several years. This time listening, I thought, you know what? That's a great song. But even on the good songs, you can hear that there are probably parts of the vocals that he would have re-recorded or done something differently with. These feel like guide vocals some of the time. And there's just a number of songs that, yeah, they are kind of filler. But there's something about the way that the good stuff on it gives you that hit of Bob Marley at his peak, like just a hint of it, and putting that in context with how young he was when he died. And just, I never bought the album, to tell you the truth, because at the time I was like, what's the point of this? But I sort of see its place and, put it in there at number 10.
Yeah, it's like one of those albums. It's a bit like Coda by Led Zeppelin, isn't it? You're thinking, really? I'm not quite sure the point of it. Right. Well, my number 10 is The Best of the Wailers, which came out in 1971. Produced and engineered by Leslie Kong, who sadly, bizarrely died just after the release of this. I can't remember whether this is the fourth or the fifth release, but it was the second recorded album, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And it came out in 71. The production is really mixed, I think is the phrase I'm going to use. We have some interesting songs. Soul Shakedown Party, which is a ska song, very much like Toots and the Maytals. Pretty decent, I've written here. Stop That Train, of course, which would come on Catch a Fire. Terrific song. Caution, really, really like that. It's got the swear words in the middle as well, I think. I was really hard to work that out there. Soul Captives, great. There's some really, really top tunes on this album. But it seems to be an album that jumps around between styles, between a bit of reggae and a bit of ska. And again, hadn't quite made its mind up, but it is pretty decent. And I've given it 2.5 stars. So it's not bad. It's pretty good actually. There are some excellent songs on it. So that's my number 10. The rather weirdly titled "The Best of the Wailers." I mean, that's one of the weirdest album titles I've ever heard for an originals album. There we have it, though. What have you got at number 9?
Number 9, I have Catch a Fire, 1973, their first island album.
Oh my God! Right, go on. Yeah.
And it's obviously a wonderful album. It established them as a mainstream, almost recording artist, an album you might find in a college radio station or college town record store. That was Blackwell's vision. I do feel that every song on it is great. There's not one bad song on it, but the way they're recorded feels somewhat compromised to me. We know that they recorded it in Jamaica, and then they sent it to Blackwell, and he added blues guitar and keyboards. I feel like, and then he also stripped back the bass a bit to make it sound more like a rock production. And I feel like all those things add up together to being not quite a satisfying listen. And also, once again, I mean, Bob Marley has re-recorded more songs than Taylor Swift. I mean, songs that he would do in 1965 would do again in 1975. You know, it's kind of crazy, and it can be a little maddening sometimes. But in some cases on Catch a Fire, like Midnight Ravers, the Lee Perry version of that is way better than the one on Catch a Fire. It just lacks a little bit of the mystery in the Catch a Fire version. I think Blackwell stripped away some of that. I mean, it's a classic album, but I just have to say that I've never found it to be completely satisfying listen. Songs like Concrete Jungle, No More Trouble sounded better live a few years later.
Yeah, I'm taken aback.
So I'm still in the 3.5 zone with Catch a Fire. Great album, but heavily compromised.
Wow, I'm genuinely shocked. My number 9 is Soul Revolution Part 2. And I've given it 2.5 stars. There are some terrific songs on here. And I was mentioning earlier on the influence of Curtis Mayfield as well is big on the band, especially with the vocals and the harmonies. So Keep On Moving, Curtis Mayfield, credit to it. Yeah, you do have some really interesting versions of songs that would appear on later albums, like Don't Rock My Boat, which would become later on Satisfy My Soul. A slightly slower version later on, of course, for Kaya. Put It On as well, of course, which would be relabeled as Pass It On, is that right? Doopy Conqueror, Memphis. I'm not sure that actually works on the album. Riding High, I love the groove. The Bunny Wailer song, and I love the groove on it. Kaya, Sun Is Shining, and I've mentioned here again. I think this was used in the dance mix, and then of course, Brainwashing as well. Sounds like a soul song. It's a pretty good album. It's a pretty good album in my opinion. Again, it's just that it's sometimes neither here nor there in terms of the style. They haven't quite. It's not quite mixing. And as you rightly say as well, I think the compilation, the Lee Scratch Perry compilations are better than any of these individual albums that he did. I don't quite get it. But there you have it. That's my number 9. What have you got in at number 8?
Number 8, I actually have Soul Rebels, the 1970 Lee Perry album. I find it's just so close to being magnificent. I mean, No Sympathy, 400 Years, Try Me, the title track. There really is not a terrible song on it. It is a little bit, like you say, a little bit neither here nor there. But as the Lee Perry collaboration went, this is the best album, straight up album that came out of that. And it's just a great listen. It's got this it's stripped down when you think about the instrumentation, but the way Lee Perry puts everything together, mixes it, it becomes kind of dense yet spare at the same time. I just love the sound of it. I'm an incredible Lee Perry fan, so kind of eat up anything that he does. And I think a lot of the songs on it are great. So I gave it 4 stars. It's my number 8.
Yeah, I love the upsetter stuff from that. My number 8 is Natty Dread, and it's coming in at 4 stars. So there's a sudden big jump.
Yeah.
And it's the first album without Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer. Lively Up Yourself, which I know they played with the two fellas. It's just a great song to kick off the album. No Woman, No Cry. I don't like this version. I think the live version is so definitive that I find it hard to listen to this album version. It's a poor studio version in comparison to the live version. It's very rare you hear a live version that's so dominant, but that really is one of them. Then Bellyful, great song. Rebel Music, of course, fantastic. You know, about police harassment, the Sus Law. I love songs like So Jase, again about the poor and the disenfranchised. Natty Dread, great song. Talking Blues. This is a really political album, and it really stands out that way. I genuinely love it. I love the feel. I love the musicianship. The band, or the Barrett brothers, are absolutely top drum musicians. The bass and the drums are so incredible. If you're a musician and you try and play the reggae bass stuff, it's very, very difficult to do properly. Everybody can scuffle along and get some sort of version, but you can't play it properly. And the same goes with the drums, with the little drop beat and all the rest of it. Absolutely incredible musicians. They really are. They are the business. They really are. I mean, Robbie Shakespeare I read the comments on him. He was just basically saying they were the masters, weren't you? You know, and that's coming from him. You know,
coming from Robbie Shakespeare himself.
You know what a player he is. You know, so you know, there you go. It's a top album. It's a 4-star album, and I really genuinely love the album. So I think, you know, it's No Woman, No Cry, dropped it down, which sounds mad, but there you go. I've got it at number 8, 4 stars, Natty Dread. What have you got it? What have you got at number 7?
Number 7, I have Rastaman Vibration from '76. This is their slickest album to date at that point. And there's a little bit of a treacly sound on some of the ballads, which is what kind of knocked it back for me. Cry to Me is sort of a traditional ballad. It's a little bit too sweet. Who the Cap Fit, the lyrics are a little bit easy, you know, a little bit lazy, I guess you could say. But Positive Vibration, roots rock reggae, which when I hear it, I sing it for the rest of the day. Like the whole, maybe even the next day. You just can't stop singing that song. I love that song so much. And then you get into the political songs, Want More, War, Rat Race. And War, when you think about it, he took a speech by Haile Selassie and turned it into a song. It's actually mind-blowing. When I was doing all my reggae research,
when we do a top 10, that will be in my top songs.
What a great song. Yes, it is so good. I didn't mention Johnny Was, which is a beautiful song about a police murder. It's just absolutely beautiful, memorably covered by Stiff Little Fingers.
It is
really great. It's a great album. I think it's really just the Cry to Me and Who the Cap Fit that took it down a little bit. I also need to mention Night Shift, which is actually one of his most autobiographical songs, because not a lot of people know that he spent time in Delaware early on, he actually left the Wailers for a while and came to America to try to make a buck. And he ended up working the night shift, I believe, in a Chrysler plant or a different
Right,
car
really?
company.
Wow.
And he's thinking about the experience of going to work at night, and you come out and the sun is out, but you're ready to go to bed. Bluesy riff. That's a really awesome song. I really love it. So it's killer album all the way. Number 7, 4.5 stars.
Wow. Right. Well, my number 7, and this is an odd one, because if side 2 was as good as side 1, this could have been number 1. My number 7 is Survival. It's a very political album. The front cover depicts it with the 48, I think it's 48 African flags on, 15 of which are now obsolete, ironically. Side 1 I've just written is absolutely outstanding. So Much Trouble in the World sets the tone. It's a fantastic starter. I love that little odd jazz type chord in the midsection. Zimbabwe, of course, was for the forthcoming nation that would occur a year later and was played at the ceremony. Top Ranking, just magnificent song about colonialism, survival, terrific song. We have other great songs on it, like One Drop, Wake and Live. It is a fantastic album, but I just think side 1 is so strong and side 2 drops off. So it gets 4 stars for me. If side 1 was if side 2 was as good as side 1, it would be a 5-star all day long, and it would probably be number 1. This is one of the albums, having not listened to it for quite a long time, if I'm being brutally honest, and I listened to it again and thought, oh my God, that's magnificent. I'm absolutely loving it.
Yeah, and talk
So,
about the rhythm section on that album. I'll get to that later. But
oh yeah, tremendous. So that's my number 7. What have you got at number 6?
I have the Leslie Kong produced The Best of the Wailers from 1971. I actually have a 74 reissue called Soul Shakedown, which makes a little more sense because that's one of the best songs on it. I just find it to be a killer album. Every track is great, except for the cover of Go Tell It on the Mountain. They didn't need to do that. There are many other songs they could have put on there. It doesn't fit. But Soul Shakedown Party, Caution, Stop the Train, Cheer Up, Back Out. I love every song on there except for that cover. Leslie Kong was an underrated producer, I think, obviously because he died so young. But he did a great job, I think, organizing their harmonies in relation to the rhythms. It's the only one that's not an island record that makes it up this high. I gave it 4.5 stars, The Best of the Wailers.
Yeah.
I love listening to it, and I just think it's a great album.
Yeah, Caution's fantastic. They also they're very much into all of those sort of, and I'm going to mention it later on, that hymn-like vocal that they have as well. There's there's quite a number of those songs. I'll come to that.
Well, the church was very big in Jamaica.
Yeah. You can absolutely hear it. Well, my number 6 is Rastaman Vibration, 4 stars again, maybe a touch more. Again, I've written just a great song. And you know what? It's one of those annoying things about this year in 1976, because Buddy Wailers released a great album with Black Heart Man and Peter Tosh released Legalize It. Could you imagine if they'd actually merged them and had one unbelievable album? They could have had one incredible, or even one great double album that they could have released that year.
Blackheart Man may be the most sheerly beautiful reggae album ever made. It's just incredible.
And I know Jake Burns loves it. He was mentioning when I was chatting. It's a great album. Yeah, fantastic. So I've just got terrific album written here. Everything's really, really good on it. Positive vibration, cool groove. Marley's promoting, communities helping each other. Roots rock reggae, great. Johnny Was, great song. And I've written here, like you, probably more famous by Stiff Little Fingers. And it's one of those rare songs where I'm going to argue that an interpretation is even better than the original.
Great job, no doubt.
Yeah, it's an incredible version. Cry to Me is, and again, similar sort of circumstances, though obviously in a different part of the world. Cry to Me, great. Crazy Bald Head, aggressive song about colonialism, which I really like. I've just written Night Shift So. I've written here in brackets. I think it's the one song that sort of doesn't work for me on this. War, I've just written as an absolute masterpiece. And Rat Race, I really like. It's fabulous. I think it's that one song that just lets it down a little bit for me.
Mhm.
4.5. It's somewhere in between there. It's a terrific album. It really is a terrific album. So that's my number 6, Rastaman Vibration.
My science teacher gave me the 45 of Rat Race, has a dub version on the other side.
Yeah.
Really,
Well,
really cool.
it's interesting that the Specials then took the title and created their own great single. So there's clearly a little nod there, isn't there? What have you got at number 5?
Number 5, I have 1974's Natty Dread, the first album, as you say, with the I3s. It's a funky sounding album. It's organic. It has a lot of different textures on it that they didn't really revisit. I like the mix of the political and the personal, which was obviously something he was always trying to work into each album. The Lively Up Yourself version is pretty good, but it's not as good as the original Lee Perry version, which was a single, or the live version later.
Yeah.
Which is why it's down here. Bend Down Low, same thing. Earlier version was better. Then there's Soja Sen Revolution, which just, they have this, the melody lines in them are so intriguing. And at the end of Revolution, when he just like lets his voice fly, it's just incredible. It grabs you. And I really love that album. No Woman, No Cry is a great song. I see where you're coming from, but it's just a beautiful song. And I think one of his most successful ballads. It feels generous. It feels open-hearted. And I also love the fact that it's credited to someone else, partially because he was having a dispute with his publisher, but also
he gave everybody a right credit, didn't they?
He wanted to give some royalties to the guy who was running a soup kitchen.
Yeah.
And, gets a check every year because of that song.
Top man. top man. Everybody got a credit. Everybody got a credit on the album.
Yeah, he was trying to get out of his entanglement with an earlier publishing company.
Yeah.
But he was also trying to spread the wealth because he's Bob Marley.
I didn't know that recently. I thought, oh, that's fantastic. Oh, I'd tip me hat off to him.
So that's my number 5.
Yeah, well, my number, how many stars did you give it?
4.5.
Yeah, well, this is where I get controversial now. My number 5 is Kaya. I absolutely love it. I love Lovers Rock, though, and it's got that whole feel about it. Yes, it's an extension of Exodus. All the songs were recorded at the same time, which seems nuts. And I believe he deliberately left these songs aside for his next album, which it's incredible to think you wrote that many songs. I'll just leave them aside, and that'll be the next album, And there's some really great songs on it. You think, my God, the first side's unbelievable. What I will say, and I mentioned this earlier on, the Stephen Marley mix is fab. I absolutely love it. It's really laid back. He's took vocal mixes from earlier mixes and incorporated them and slightly varied the sound a little bit as well. So there are slightly different mixes. It's a fabulous mix. Yeah, go and check it out. I love it. You might hate it, but I absolutely love it. It really fits in with that whole Lovers Rock feel. I think if I'm going to be brutally honest, it would be, if it was the Stephen Marley mix, it would be higher up in my rankings.
Interesting.
So there you have it.
And you got to get the deluxe edition. It has a concert from someone who grew up I think in 78. It's just a great show.
Yeah, without a doubt. There are some great songs though. Obviously stuff that they'd already done, but like Kaya and that, and Sun is Shining, Easy Skanking, great song. I love Satisfy My Soul. I actually prefer some of these versions. I'm going to be honest about it. I really love the re-recording of Kaya. I really like Sun is Shining again. It's a different version, but it's different. My one criticism.
Can't wreck that song.
Yeah, my one criticism, and it's about a song that should have been on the album, and it's that Smile Jamaica. It's a great song.
Right.
I don't understand why it's not on the album. You go, how did that not get on?
They tacked that onto the CD, and it just
why tag it on when it was actually recorded at the time, and you could have just put it on anywhere? That makes no sense, because it's an absolutely outstanding track. I don't understand stuff like that at times.
There's another song like that. I think when he recorded Natty Dread, he also did a song called Jah Will or something like that, which was written for Haile Selassie. And it was only a single, but it was, could have been on any album.
Yeah, I don't get it. It just makes no it makes no sense. Well, what have you got at number 4?
Number 4. All right, now we're getting into a very tight zone here.
Yeah.
This is the last 4.5 album, 4.5 stars for Uprising in 1980. It is a beautiful, expansive album. They change up the rhythm sound quite a bit. It's still the great playing, but the way they produce the drums, very different, trying to fit in with maybe a different sound on the radio, or just, Jamaica, they're constantly innovating. So I think they tried to do some of that on there. And obviously, Could You Be Loved was a dance pop song. It doesn't even really have a reggae rhythm.
It was massive in the UK, by the way. It was massive in the
Huge
UK.
song. And I'll tell you, the album has such a personal part in my life, because in high school I was in this band, the Young Aborigines, which later sort of became the Beastie Boys. But that's a whole other story. Now, the funny thing about the Young Aborigines is we were making music that was based on Gang of Four, Susie and the Banshees, Public Image, things like that, with salsa and reggae mixed in. But when we stopped rehearsing, we would put on Uprising and just dance till the thing was over. And it was like every day it was Uprising and Off the Wall. We would just put on those albums, and they, in a way, both of them felt like a pinnacle that could not be reached. The production is so good, and the musicianship is superb. Just absolutely great album. I feel like there's not a bad song on it. Coming In From the Cold is beautiful. Real Situation is just fantastic. We and Them and Work always sound a little similar to me, and I think that's why it ended up at number 4.
Right.
They're a little interchangeable, but then you have Forever Loving Jah. I'm not a religious person at all, but that song moves me spiritually. And when I saw him in concert, he played it. And that was the only time he ever played it. Obviously, he only had 2 more concerts to go in his life, but he hadn't played it since the album came out in the rest of the tour. The only time he played it, and I was in the room. And I just remember practically, falling over. I was just struck by that melody just coming off the stage. It's just an incredible song. As you say, it's hymnal. It really is a religious song, one of the best ever. And then we have Redemption Song. The idea, he was always surrounded by these great musicians. And here he is with an out of tune, maybe even broken guitar. It's kind of like Mark Bolan. I always say Mark Bolan will rock harder than anybody on a guitar with 3 strings and out of tune. But Bob Marley just plucking away at that thing. And just what a gorgeous song. I know there's a full band version of it, but this is the version that.
No, it is. The band version's great, but this is better. It reminds me of, I think, of like what would have happened to Springsteen's Nebraska if he'd released the band version. It would have been great, but it wouldn't have been as good as those little home demos that he did on a 4-track.
And obviously he died a year later, and it became sort of an epitaph in a way, because he's sort of singing about the whole history of his people in one song. Absolutely incredible. And maybe we stopped dancing when that song came on and we just listened in wonder.
Yeah, it's fabulous, isn't it? Because the hardest songs to write are easy songs, and it's such an easy song to play. But it's brilliant. It is. Well, we'll come to it, though. We will come to it. Great choice. So my number 4 is Exodus. And I mentioned earlier on, it was just sort of ubiquitous with everything you heard in 1977. It was everywhere. It's a terrific album, isn't it? There's so many great songs on it. Natural Mystic, Barrett Brothers on top form at this point. So much things to say. I've got written here, Guiltiness About Promises and Greed. Obviously, Exodus is one of the great songs, I think. I really do think that. So you got the whole first side is sort of spiritual and sort of angry, and then the second side's all sort of calm and about love. It is literally an album of 2 halves: jamming, class, Wait in Vain, brilliant. Turn Your Lights Down Low, about his relationship with Cindy Breakspeare. 3 Little Birds, which I absolutely love. One Love, of course, is absolutely top draw version of the 1965 song, which very, very different, but of course it's incredible. It is a top album. It's the album that's in this country, I would say, certainly in the UK, is the album that everybody thinks of when they think of Bob Marley, it's the Exodus album. It tends to be the one that jumps to mind. It is a great album. It's a great album for a reason. It's 4.5 stars for me. It's close, but not quite there at 5 territory. Because is there anything that jumps out and I don't like? I don't think there is. I don't think there's anything I don't like on the album. So I'm maybe being a bit harsh about it. I just think he did better albums, and I think the other albums are a little step above, is my taste. So I thought they're just a teeny weeny bit better. Hence the fact I've given them 5 stars. So there you have it. What have you got at number 3?
Number 3, I have Burnin, 1973, their second album for Island. I give it 5 stars. It's got heavenly harmonies, ultra funky tracks, many classic songs. Get Up, Stand Up. What is that, an album opener or what? I mean, astonishing.
And Peter Tosh dominates it, doesn't he, as well?
Yeah, Tosh sings so well on it. This is the best album I think they made as Peter, Bunny, and Bob.
Right.
It just is incredible. I Shot the Sheriff. You know, you can't hardly believe somebody wrote these songs. Burning and Looting. And the remakes are great. Small Axe, Put It On, Duppy Conqueror, at least equal to the earlier recordings with a little more polish, a little more wisdom, maturity to them. I just think that, you know, Blackwell put a little touch on it with a little bit of keyboards, but he sort of was a little more hands-off. And the songwriter is incredible. We should also mention Jean Watt, who was Bunny Wailer's wife.
Yes. Get 2 credits.
Yeah, and Pass It On, 2 beautiful songs.
Yeah, beautiful songs.
And you know, and they're showcases for Bunny Wailer with that falsetto. That's one of the best falsettos in the business. Just absolutely fantastic. And when I was doing a little research, I learned that she actually has dementia and went missing years ago.
Oh.
Bunny Wailer died not knowing where she was.
Oh, terrible.
Very, very tragic. But this album, like I said, it was the first one that I heard. I later ordered my copy from Jamaica on the Tough Gong label. I didn't know then that Jamaican pressings were not always the best, but it does actually sound great. The sleeve
it doesn't surprise you though, does it?
The sleeve is a little flimsy, but it really sounds great. And I just think it's absolutely fantastic album. There's not one bad song. And once again, like Forever Loving Jah, at the end you have the Rastaman chant, which just, you know, it so chills you out, just so beautiful. And it's a committed album where they're all 3 working together and firing on all cylinders, and the rhythm's just superb. 5 stars for Burnin at number 3.
Yeah, well, it's my number 3 as well. I was actually playing it today. And
I agree.
remind myself, I absolutely love this album. And I was playing it, and I was thinking, yeah, it really is just superb album. Everything you've said there is just, it is a super album. The lyrics are great. Small Axe, you know, that David and Goliath sort of feel within it. I've got some daft comments written on here, which you might laugh at. I've written One Foundation on here. Peter Tosh, religious theme. In brackets, I've got the words Boney M written on. There is very much that, as you say, that sort of By the Rivers of Babylon feel on a lot of their songs. They are such a good, they're such a good religious harmony band. Again, the bonus tracks that have come on the download versions and the CD versions, there's an argument they should have been on the albums. Reincarnated Soul, No Sympathy is just brilliant. The Oppressed song, just superb. But I've in particular, No Sympathy, I thought should have been on the album for me. I didn't understand why. Again, I don't understand why it's not on the album. And you talk about Tough Gong as well. It's interesting that they sometimes have slightly different versions to the Island versions in terms of the same tracks, but in just slightly different orders, which is interesting.
Yeah,
I'll be intrigued to see what the differences are between the Jamaican versions in terms of the pressings and the Island versions.
Well, I will say that will come up with my next pick, but
right.
As far as I know, the Tough Gong version, at least the one I have, is the same as the Island version.
Yeah.
Maybe the bass is a little richer, but it's, you know, it's just an incredible record.
Well, Catch a Fire, 5 stars for me. It's a 5-star album, so I've reached 5 stars now from 3 to 1.
Burnin.
Yeah, for Burnin. Sorry, I'm giving the game away. Go on, what have you got next?
I have at number 2, Survival from 1979, 5 stars. I remember having a conversation with my friend Mike D about why isn't this album get the respect? Why doesn't this album get the respect of some other albums like Exodus or Burnin? And he said, well, it's his blackest album. In some ways it is,
I
deeply
think that's a really valid point, isn't it? Yeah.
Deeply engaged, obviously, with Afrobeat, with those horn sections, and also the I3s are still on it, but there's also a little more masculine sound to the backing vocals. He's got the guys chipping in on backing vocals, giving it a little bit more of that sound. And now the thing that's really interesting is that you talked about side 1 and side 2.
Yeah.
This is one where there are 2 track listings. And for my
Yes, there are.
In my opinion, one of them is right and the other one is wrong. The one that is wrong is the one that you were listening to.
Yes. You might be right, and it might flip the way I listen to it if I go and listen.
Because
if I go and reconfigure the listing.
The Island American version opens with Wake Up and Live.
Yeah.
That to me is an album opener. You cannot close an album with that or put it in the middle of an album. It's an opening track. It's telling you to wake up and live, to get out and drive through the ruts, when you're riding through the ruts. And it's just such a that song alone, I feel like I could talk about for 10 minutes from the count off at the beginning. 1, 2, 3, and into the boom, that, just comes in. And then there's like that weird staticky thing that happens in the middle where it sounds like somebody's saying, turn up the bass.
Yes.
Like, I'm not sure what they're saying, but it's just so cool. I listen for it every time. And the rhythm section on this album it's just ridiculous. I don't think people may have played the bass as well as Family Man on this album, but nobody has played it better. Just the absolute feel of it. And of course,
the bass player never gets mentioned, and it really annoys me. There are certain bass players don't get mentioned, and it's the reggae guys. Everyone is all great bass players. And don't get us wrong, who are my favorite bands? So you'll see, John Edwards get mentioned, or Geddy Lee, or whatever. But you never see you never see the reggae guys. You think, wow, it's totally
he's always up. Yeah, exactly. I always, when people say who's one of the best, who are the best bass players, Family Man is always on there for me.
Yeah,
I count him with Peter Hook, Jaw Wobble, Family Man, Larry Graham. I mean,
Jaw Wobble, great. Yeah, I love Jaw Wobble.
Those were all my inspirations. And then just the whole album, I think, is fantastic. I love Babylon System, Ambush in the Night. I remember I first, this album got such a bad rap that I didn't buy it when it came out, but I bought the single of Ambush because I knew that was good. And it has a killer dub version on the B-side. But obviously the album version is great too. One Drop, he's talking to generations because, like I said, they're always innovating in Jamaica. And sometimes they'll say, well, that record from 2 years ago is now too old. We don't want to hear that in the dance hall anymore. We've changed the rhythm. We've changed the production. He's saying we can all get together over a rhythm. We can all be one to the One Drop rhythm. And so much trouble in the world. I remember once I was walking down the street and that song came on in my earbuds. And I just thought, we need Bob Marley. Nobody writes a song like that anymore. That just seems to put everything in one place. I just think it's an absolutely incredible album. Also, the bold move to put the slave ship diagram.
Yes, very, very clever. And people skirt over it, don't they,
It's on the inner sleeve as well, and he explains it. He's going to the root, to the heart of the division, the slave trade. He's saying, his people would never have been in Jamaica if not for the slave trade.
When I teach Strange Fruit, is sort of one of my lessons occasionally for English. That's the image I actually put on, So that works. Yeah, it's such a dominant image.
It's incredible. And the funny thing is I bought it from iTunes at one point because I wanted to have it on my iPod, and they had the Jamaican track listing. So I reorganized it and put it in a playlist. And when I started a number of years ago, my daughter and I love to go skiing, and it's always very early in the morning when we leave because the best skiing is before lunch. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I started putting on Wake Up and Live, putting on the Survival album on the way to the ski area. Now we're not trying to trivialize the record because it's a very important record with a lot of great messages, but it is the album that gets us to the ski area every single time. And one of the coolest things I found was that there was a session when he was recording that album, he did a session for a song called Wounded Lion, which has still never been released. And the jam version of it is about 20 minutes long. It's absolutely incredible. It could easily be cut down. There is the core of a 3.5 minute song in there that would just blow people's minds. It's beautiful, but that's the song that usually comes on when we're heading home. And it's just a magnificent experience. He was at the top of his game with Survival. That's why I gave it number 2, 5 stars.
I can really see that, you know. I really can see that, and it'll be interesting. I might go back and reconfigure the track listing and see what it
Put the track listing in the American. They have it on Wikipedia.
The track listing makes a massive difference, though, to certain albums. If you listen to certain albums in a different order, it doesn't work, and it really is a big deal. So I don't know, that'll be interesting. And as you rightly say, because that's why I was making such a big deal about the first side being so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm looking forward to that then. My number 2 is Catch a Fire. I love it. I know there are 2 versions. There's the Jamaican version and there's the island version. I genuinely love it. I really like the mix in terms of what he did with it. I think it's just a great, great album. Everything on it is fantastic. I know we put Wayne Perkins on the country player. I really like that. I think it works. Yes, it's westernized, but I do think it works. And you got Rabbit on keyboard from Free. Robbie Shakespeare on Country Jungle as well. I didn't actually know that until recently. I was quite surprised at that. It's obviously a great song. The whole album is just, every song on it is just top notch.
Yeah, there's not a bad song.
There's not an average song on it. Everything's brilliant. The harmonies, the band are immense. And I keep talking about how, as a singer, it's something that you pick up on. Peter Tosh, I've just written here, fantastic in big letters. His voice is magnificent on 400 Years. It really is passionate. You can hear the plead in it. I love Slave Driver, of course, the irony of allegedly being free, but not free from poverty. Stop That Train, beautiful hymn-like feel. Baby, We've Got to Dance. I love that little cool slide in the background. Stir Up. The whole album is just marvelous. It all works. Both versions are different and both equally good in different sort of ways in terms of the mixes. So I couldn't really differentiate because they both work. I also, big shout out to the original sleeve. So when I had the record shop, you'd open it up, of course, and it was a lighter. And you bring it out, really quite impressive. That's the one. I love it. Yeah, that's the one that everybody wanted. But of course, the subsequent album, the sleeve there, on the other side there, with them smoking that big joint, was also fantastic. And I thought, yeah, there's a that encapsulates what the album's about as well, brilliantly. So Catch a Fire, I adore it. It's 5 stars. So that's my number 2. So your number 1.
My number 1, well, there's only one left. 5 stars for Exodus, 1977. This album is so important to me. There was a summer where I lived alone in the Berkshires. I had a summer job and my parents were off doing something else. And I pretty much only listened to 2 albums that whole summer, which was Exodus and then the Bad Brains ROIR cassette.
Plus,
I listened to a few other things. Those 2 were every single day. And Exodus side 1 to me is like a history lesson. There was so much in there. And like I said, I was researching reggae and Rastafarianism. I literally wrote down every lyric in my notebook because he only had the lyrics for Exodus on the inner sleeve for the song Exodus. Didn't have any other lyrics. So I'd be writing these things down and thinking, who's Paul Bogle? What did Marcus Garvey actually do? I knew there was a name, Marcus Garvey, but what did he actually do? And then I'd be at the library the next day after work, finding books about it. So I just felt like he just takes you through this entire rich history. And obviously the opening, Natural Mystic, the way it fades in, the fade in is not something that's done very often, and it's usually not done very well. But on that song, it's just perfect. It's like it's coming out of the mist at you. When that rhythm hits you, it's just extraordinary. It's just, all of side 1 is majesty, mystery, and history. Side two, I feel like, today we talk a lot about self-care. If you're on the front lines, say as a healthcare worker or a political activist, you also need to take time for yourself and to nurture the relationships in your life. And I think side two was Bob Marley kind of saying that, like this is really important. Like with Kaya, I think he went a little too far with that, but this is really important that we have romantic love, that we explore these different moods, that we sing a song to our children like Three Little Birds, which I used to sing to my children when they were young. It really just a masterful album. Everything, it seems to encompass the whole world in a way, like Mahler said a symphony should. Exodus and Survival are very close for me. It was a tough call, but I just found that the way my body reacted when I put on Exodus after not listening for a while, maybe a year, it's a masterpiece. Somebody called it the greatest album of the century. I'm not sure if, that's too hard for me to pick, but it is certainly a fantastic album. Yes, and the song Exodus.
Yeah.
When you listen like that one, he invented kind of a new rhythm. It doesn't have the drop rhythm of a lot of reggae. It's just forward motion all the way through. Really good. And there are some good alternate songs that didn't make it onto the album too, like that song Roots, I think it's called. Summer trees, summer branches, I and I, the roots.
Right, you got the whole of Kaya.
Terrific song. And obviously his last recording with Lee Perry was around this time when he did Punky Reggae Party. And on the deluxe version of Exodus, they have the original 12-inch version and the dub version. I mean, that's like a wild trip.
Is that when Lee Perry was recording Complete Control with The Clash? That must have been about the same time.
Around the same time. That's also, Punky Reggae Party also has Aswad, I believe, as the backing band. The Wailers weren't around for whatever reason. And also, let's think about the context of Exodus. He had been the subject of an assassination attempt.
Yes.
He literally had to make an exodus. He had to run out of Jamaica. He was worried he was going to get killed. And he was also traumatized. His wife, Rita, was shot in the head. The bullet went between the skin and the skull. They were hiding for their lives in the bathroom of his home. I mean, this was a serious assassination attempt. They're very lucky they weren't all killed.
Yeah, because look what happened to Peter Tosh, unfortunately, you know.
Exactly. And so he came to London, he came to England for a place to feel safe. But then he just unleashed. And as you said, recorded 2 albums and a number of singles in a brief period of time. So when you think about that, it's just the strength, the resilience, the passion, the power. It's all there on Exodus.
Sadly, the irony being is that he broke his toe in England playing football, didn't he? And apparently that's where he got the cancer from.
Yeah.
So it's like a double-edged sword in some respects, isn't it? It's deeply ironic, sadly. Yeah, really, really sad. He was massively into his football. Which the videos
he was pretty good too. I've watched videos of him playing.
He's good. He's very good, actually. But yeah, great choice. Absolutely great choice. Well, my number one is someone mentioned earlier on is Uprising, and for the reasons that I said earlier on, in terms of I played over and over. It's an album I know inside out. I could literally sing the whole thing. It starts and finishes perfectly. I think that I actually love the running order on this, coming in from the cold. It's such a great opener. And I think maybe it's for me, because when I first heard it, it was the middle of winter. You know, you're pressing it on and it's fab, you're wrapped up in your blanket, you're coming in from the cold. Great. What I also will mention here, I've got written here, is what a superb mix this is. I love the mix on this album. You were mentioning before, they always try to come up with new ideas. And I think you're right, on this album, there's a real, slightly different feel in terms of the mix, and it really does work. A lot of the songs sound really happy, and they're really about negative situations, real solution. It sounds really jovial, and it's a sad song about war and that there's no solution. I mean, look at the world now, and it still resonates, unfortunately, you know. Bad card about his ex-manager. It again sounds happy, and it's really negative. every song is just superb on it. Wayne, great work, love it. Zion Train, just is
Massive.
is it preparing for him to die? I don't know. It's got that sort of
Maybe.
you know that sort of ambiguity about it. I absolutely love Pimper's Paradise. It's got a real melancholy vocal to it. The whole situation, of course, is referred to in it. It's really sad. You can almost hear his voice aging, and it's got some sort of feel about it. But it's beautiful. And then, as you say, "Could You Be Loved" is one of the greats. This album was actually really big in the UK at the time. "Could You Be Loved" was massive, and I've just written here in brackets, "splendid." That was just very English.
And it did get, like I said, it did get him on Black radio in New York.
Yeah, I can see why. It's a top 10 song that I'm giving it away, but "Could You Be Loved" will be in there. "Forever Loving Jaws," marvelous, and you mentioned that before there. And then, as you say, a redemption song to finish, and it's a perfect bookend. It's a perfect bookend in terms of his life. That's why I was so miffed with that follow-up album. But I've already mentioned that. It finishes his whole career perfectly, and it's one of those things, isn't it? When he died, I was genuinely taken aback. I said, "Whoa, shut up! Really?" I think he was 36, something crazy like that. And you're thinking, it was 1981. Of course, Lennon had just died in December 1980, and then Bob Marley dies, and you're thinking, that can't be right. That really can't be right. A man who's so dominant in terms of a genre and so big. I mean, I know Don Letts famously said he's possibly the most famous piece of artwork in the world is the picture of Bob Marley, and there's a possibility, isn't it? I'm not sure there are many
T-shirts around the world.
Yeah, there are not many more. I'd maybe my bias might go out with the Aladdin Sane cover or something, but there are not there are not many. I'd probably still say it's Bob Marley. I'm not sure there are many more famous faces. You know, at the time, he was probably up there with Muhammad Ali as the most famous man or person in the world. Probably more famous at the time of the presidents and various other people. Just enormous. I mean, his legacy is huge. Everybody seems to have a copy of Legend, you know, and it is brilliant. It could probably be another 20, 30 songs longer, but it is brilliant. But you know, what can we say? It'd be interesting to see what other people's lists are, and in terms of what people think. We'll be definitely do a top 10 show. That'll be fascinating. I'll be intrigued to see what you come up with in terms of top 10, which seems to be pushing it short, but you know, we'll give it a go. So, folks, till the next time, if you stick your lists in, we'd love to see what you've got and whether you agree with Jeremy or myself, and we'd really love to see that. So till the next time, take care, folks, and look after yourself. Bye-bye.